Good evening. My name is Danny Williamson. I'll be your host here this evening. It's my honor to spend a little time, share a stage with you, share the room with you just for a brief time this evening. I will share a few notes of housekeeping, then I'll ask Dr. Charlotte Yates from the university to join us on stage to moderate tonight's debate. Before we begin, I'd like to start with a brief land acknowledgement. So from the Anishinaabe to the Haudenosaunee and the Métis, these treaty lands are steeped in rich Indigenous history and modern traditions. As a community, we have the responsibility to honor and respect the four directions: land, waters, plants, animals, and ancestors. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation of the Anishinaabe peoples, on whose ancestral and treaty lands we teach, learn, and live. I'd like to thank you for joining us tonight. A particular thank you to the many candidates for council, and of course to the candidates for mayor here on the stage tonight. Thank you also to the city clerk, Stephen O'Brien, for being here with voter information, and a shout out to the many volunteers who helped make this evening possible. If we could have the volunteers in the room just raise your hand so that we can briefly acknowledge and thank you for your work. This evening's event has been sponsored and supported by an ad hoc coalition of organizations, including the Guelph Wellington Coalition for Social Justice, the Guelph Coalition for Active Transportation, the Ontario Central Students Association, Guelph Labour Council, the LEAP Guelph, Fair Vote Guelph, OPIRG Guelph, CFUW Guelph, Emerge, and CFRU. And a special thanks, she's somewhere in the room, Donna Jennison, who made significant contributions to making this evening possible. And a brief note, if you require them, the washrooms can be found just outside the door on your left. My left, outside the main door here. There will be an opportunity to ask questions of the candidates. Paper and pencils are available at the door if you haven't already got them. Please write down your question, take it to the desk. That's on my left, your right. If you need assistance or are uncomfortable writing the question, please ask one of our volunteers here around the room. There were some costs involved in organizing tonight's event to rent the hall, print posters, and so on. Our volunteers will be passing the hat over the course of the debate. If you are able to make a contribution, please do. Any amount is appreciated. And if there are funds left over, they will be donated to the Children's Foundation. I'd like now to introduce you to our moderator. The moderator of tonight's debate is the Provost and Vice President Academic of the University of Guelph. Charlotte Yates joined the University of Guelph in 2015. She served for 7 years as the Dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences at McMaster University, where she was a professor since 1987. She studies labor relations and industrial policy, especially in the automotive industry, and is a frequent media commentator on social issues. Dr. Yates.
Good evening, everyone. There are a couple of extra seats if people want to sit. I see a few just because it's going to be an exciting night. So to stand for the entire night might be straining for some of you. So I have the great pleasure of moderating tonight's debate. And let me first start by saying thank you all for coming out. Politics is partly about debate, discussion of issues, and certainly tonight is part of that process. And I'm very pleased to introduce you to the two candidates who I'm sure need no introduction, but let me start. On my far right is Cam Guthrie, who was elected Mayor of Guelph in 2014 after serving as councillor for Ward 4 from 2010 to 2014. Before entering politics, he was a licensed insurance broker and an entrepreneur. He served on the boards of several local nonprofit organizations and has mentored business owners through the Business Centre of Guelph Wellington. He holds a diploma from Sir Stanford Fleming College. Cam and his wife Rachel are the parents of two children, Annika and Adelaide. Aggie Mlynarz was the NDP candidate in Guelph in the recent provincial election campaign. She holds a BA and a master's degree in theatre arts from the University of Guelph and has experience as a playwright as well as actor, crew member, and a director of documentary films. Aggie was born in Germany shortly after the fall of the Berlin Wall and has lived in Canada since 1990. Let me explain very briefly the format for this evening's debate. The evening debate will have two parts. In the first part, I will put questions to each of the candidates from the sponsoring organizations of this evening's event. The first question, I discuss this with the candidate. The first question will go to one candidate. In this case, Aggie will begin the debate. The second question to the other candidate, and so forth. Each candidate will be given 1.5 minutes to answer each question. And then each candidate will have the opportunity to respond to the other, again with a maximum of 1.5 minutes for their response. It's not a lot of time, and I want to say thank you. I know how difficult, you can barely take a breath in 1.5 minutes, let alone answer a complex political question. But we would ask, if you can, to respect the timelines as much as possible, because that way we're able to ask as many questions as we can. Our timekeepers are in the front, and they will hold up a yellow card for the candidates at the 1 minute mark, and then a red card when time is up. So when it comes, try and wrap it up so we can move forward. As our evening has a limited amount of time, I would ask that we try and be as respectful of time, all of us, so that we can move through as many of your questions as possible. The second part of the event will begin at 8:50 this evening. And then I will take questions from the floor. On my left, if you're interested during the course of the evening, you want to pose a question, please write it out. We have a team here who's going to sort through those questions to reduce duplication and make sure we can get through as many as possible. By the look of the piles of questions, I would say there's tremendous enthusiasm, but there won't be enough time to go through them all. So please accept my apologies in advance that we just don't have enough time to get through everyone's question. So on that note, if our candidates are ready, I am going to ask the first question, and the questions have been identified by the group that has posed them. So I will introduce that, and then we'll start with Aggie and the questions from there. So the first question is from Leap Guelph. The question is, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission makes clear that reconciliation is the responsibility of every Canadian and every Canadian community. What do you see as being meaningful reconciliation work that could move the city beyond territorial acknowledgements and flag raising? Aggie.
Thank you, Dr. Yates. I think we have an extraordinary opportunity in the Clare Maltby area to do an act on reconciliation, to discuss with the Mississauga New Credits how we should develop properly on that land, and do so with that sensitivity in mind. And I believe that this is the kind of very meaningful action we can take in this direction, considering how large of a development that area is looking to be. And as residents of the city of Guelph, we have a great opportunity to be a leader amongst municipalities in and around the area in moving so on the Clare Maltby area.
Thank you. So Cam, are you ready? Time is? Yes,
Yep.
Cam, your response to the question.
Well, thank you very much. The duty to consult has been an issue that has come up quite a bit, especially since reconciliation has come forward across the country. One of the struggles that's happening amongst all municipalities, especially in Ontario, is actually a coordinated effort on that duty to consult. And so the Association of Municipalities of Ontario has actually gotten together and has worked on how this type of duty to consult can actually flow, especially when it comes to policy work from the provincial government, because really it's the provincial government through Crown corporations and whatnot that would direct the type of duty to consult to the municipalities. one of the concerns, especially raised by the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, is that when cities go at it alone, they can actually create fractured relationships because some of the territorial regions of our Indigenous people, they cross over other boundaries. And so where you have one city doing one thing and another city doing another, it can actually create some problems. So we're actually working through AMO to get some clarity around how that duty to consult would take place. But I am proud of this term of council under myself and with council that was able to bring the acknowledgement forward, do the flag raising, and it should be more consulting when it comes forward, not just in Clare Maltby, but for other reasons across the city as well.
Thank you. Aggie, would you like to respond to Cam?
Yes, I would. My concern is right now we have a provincial government that has rolled back on the Indigenous curriculum. This kind of action demonstrates to me that waiting on them to move forward on things like proper consultation is going to be long and problematic, which is why I believe that as a community in which we have 6,000 or so individuals who recognize as First Nations or Métis, we do need to sit down and properly consult with them. I believe that we're a community that has this extraordinary ability to come to the table, to work together through issues, and I think that given that in Guelph, that we may be able to begin a process at least and show leadership in this direction at the AMO, because I think that with the direction in which government is moving, municipalities are seeing and looking at downloading far more responsibilities. And this is one that we can really take a big step forward on.
Thank you. Cam, would you like to respond to
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. So it's important to note that the City of Guelph is actually working on this already. In fact, I've talked to staff that are working on this. So this is nothing new. And Councillor Downer is actually on the AMO board working on this. So it's important that that the citizens of Guelph and our Indigenous community knows that this is being worked on right now. And lastly, it's important to also note, because my competitor brought up Clare Maltby, that the consultant that was hired specifically for Clare Maltby has actually been keeping the Indigenous community in the loop and in contact with everything that's been happening over the last couple of years. So I just don't want it to leave the room as if there's been absolutely no consultation at all, because that's not accurate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for clapping, ma'am. That's very nice.
The second question, which will be answered first by Cam, is from the CFUW. The vacancy rate for rental accommodation in Guelph is 1.2%, well below the minimum of 3% required for a healthy rental market. The Affordable Housing Strategy recommends offering developers a financial incentive to build more affordable housing rental units. The Affordable Housing Reserve has been and is severely underfunded in the past 4 years. Will you commit to funding the Affordable Housing Reserve as recommended in the strategy? And what other steps will you take to grow stock of affordable housing? Over to you, Cam.
Thank you. So yes, our vacancy rate has been a problem ongoing for quite some time. Healthy one would be anywhere between 3 up to 5%. And so that's absolutely noted. When it comes to the Affordable Housing Reserve, I differ a little bit from the way the question was worded, only because when I started as the mayor, I believe the reserve was in the $400,000 range, and it's up to, I believe, about $1 million now. So it has been funded. In regards to the incentives, it's looking at an amount of approximately $300,000 a year, and that needs to be taken into context of the entire budget when it comes forward onto whether or not that is required based on what council's decision is. When it comes to affordability, I get it, and I want everyone to know that it is a big issue in town. And it is something that we do need to give incentives on. However, I just want to remind everyone that we did have an opportunity in this city to build 20 affordable homes for seniors, but council voted that down this past year. And in fact, that money went to Palmerston instead of Guelph. And so affordability is one issue when it comes to the housing and to the incentive program. But the last thing I'll say is this, is that with that $1 million, and I've said this publicly at council, is that instead of always looking at the incentive program just for developers, there could be opportunities for us to look at other incentive programs to help with the private sector as well.
Thank you.
Other than developers, private sector other than developers.
Thank you, Cam. Aggie.
I have to commend you on that answer because we need to look at housing on a continuum, I believe. So when we talk about affordable housing, that's anywhere from having inclusionary zoning principles, which a municipality can do so. So that makes that 20% of all new units need to be 20% below market value to help individuals like myself, for example, get a foot in the door to buy a home. The other side of it, of course, one which the Poverty Task Force has been very active on, is the very much so lack of social and public housing and permanent supportive housing. And although there might be some money in the reserve, it's a drop in the bucket. And it's disappointing that in 2018, $500,000 was asked and $0 was put into the reserve fund. And it's also disappointing that in 2017, for financial assistance in housing, the $325,000 recommended by the Poverty Task Force elimination was also not met. So I think I agree that there's going to be a solution that will probably require some kind of public-private partnership. However, I also feel that we need to have not only one-off kind of investments into this fund, but to continue to do so in a way that's proactive and consistent on a year-to-year basis.
Thank you, Aggie. Cam, would you like to respond?
Sure, not to rebut anything, but just to continue the conversation. It's a valid conversation to have. So, one of the goals is it's a percentage of the homes that are being affordable, both home ownership and rental. And so it's important to note that over the last 5-year term of when the data was looked at, we are already meeting those goals. And that doesn't mean we have work to do, but I'm just saying that we're already meeting those goals. And the new one that this term of council has dedicated to themselves to is only 1% that's going to be dedicated to what's called primary rentals or primary units. And that's where some of this money, the $1 million that's in the reserve, can go to. And the last thing that Aggie brought up was that in regards to the continuum or the different types of housing that's available out there and the social housing, that's all done through the County of Wellington. The City of Guelph pays millions and millions of dollars to them to administer that. And just as a side note, I'm really glad that after 10 years of a fractured and destructive relationship between the City of Guelph and the county, I was able to bring that relationship back together, and I actually sit on that social services committee now, so I'm actually a part of the conversations that are happening around affordable housing where it didn't happen before.
Thank you, Cam. Aggie, your turn to respond.
My biggest concern is until we begin to address inequality, until we begin to address poverty in sort of a more spectrum-like thinking than in silos, we're going to continue to see this to be a growing problem. With 6,000 people in core housing needs and a reliance on private markets or developments to try and lift these people out, we're going to continue to see these issues rise. And unless we find a solution quickly with the County of Wellington and efficiently to move towards that permanent supportive housing, we're not going to be able to keep people moving out of public and social housing into the next level, into options like options for homes, into a better rental market. So, I mean, for my generation, for example, with us only making $40,000 a year, maybe 8 out of 10 of us, and a one-bedroom condo looking to begin to buy at $400,000, the situation is even bleak for an individual like myself. So until we address those kinds of issues from that big picture thinking and recognize what a crisis housing is and that it is a basic human right, I believe that we're going to continue to see this as a rising problem and it's going to affect us the most municipally on the front lines.
Thank you, Aggie. The third question of the evening comes from Emerge. Climate change is a critical issue facing cities everywhere. The Community Energy Initiative is a worthwhile program, and the 100% renewable energy goal is admirable. But the benefits of both will only be felt in the medium to long term. What will you do to significantly reduce the city's impact on global climate change starting in January 2019, as soon as you take office? Aggie?
I think we have a great opportunity here. And again, this is why I'm so proud of this community for coming together and Emerge for bringing this initiative forward, but also doing such an excellent job in educating everyone on what it means to go 100% renewable for the city of Guelph and to begin to invest in net zero homes. My big concern is we're developing at a very rapid pace, and that's great. It's something that we need to do. However, I would like to see development that is forward thinking 50 years into the future, that we need to kind of begin to pressure towards putting on and building those net zero ready homes. So we're not building homes for 10, 15 years ago. We're building homes for 10, 15 years from tomorrow when people are going to want to upgrade and move towards 100% renewable energy, and to be able to assist them now in doing so, especially with how much development that we're seeing. I'd also love to support the GEARS program and begin to see that implemented as well. Unfortunately, provincially, we are seeing some struggles in terms of rollbacks on funding for green technology and for green home improvements. So I think that this is a great opportunity again for the municipality to step up and to say, how can we be a leader in this direction, and how can we invite that business and that technology to come to Guelph and to continue to be that green city and that green environmental leadership we've demonstrated for years now.
Thank you. Cam?
Thank you. Well, there's really two ways to attack that issue, and one is transportation, and the other one is buildings. So the question was, what would I do as mayor? Well, as mayor already, we have passed motions to look at EVing or electrifying our fleet, and that is going to be huge, not only for our fleet of smaller cars or trucks, if that's possible, but also our transit system as well. So if we can EV our fleet and look to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions through that way, that would be excellent. Then there's the buildings. And so there is the GEARS program, which I'm excited about. It will be coming back this coming year. And that will be something that would be good incentives to individuals in their homes to look at upgrading their homes in ways that they can upgrade it to be more environmentally friendly, but also reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. The 100% renewable declaration by the city of Guelph for the from the corporation. I just want to touch on that. That was something that took a lot of effort to get a unanimous vote on council. A lot of effort behind the scenes. And I was very, very proud at that moment when we were able to take a leadership position in saying, if the city of Guelph wants to be net zero by 2050, that's great, but we're going to show a leadership example and try to make our corporation 100% renewable. And I'm very proud of what we did in the last term of council on that.
Thank you. Aggie, a response to Cam?
Yeah, I feel that the conversation is great, but I think generationally for me, a disappointment has always been that in the last 10 to 12 years, that many of the conversations that we were having 10, 12 years ago, we're still having today. So I think that unless we begin to act very much so now and be aggressive in the decision making that we do so in this direction, we're not going to see the change that we need. And there's so much at risk, so much threatened to be lost if we don't make these decisions and if we don't be bold and empowered to move so. So unless we begin to put that pressure municipally, strengthen environmental bylaws, strengthen protections around groundwater, encourage development that is sustainable and forward and future thinking, protect canopy, protect parkland. These are all things that are interconnected that in the next 4 years, I believe, need to take leaps and bounds forward and not just steps.
Thank you. Cam, a response to Aggie?
Sure, just a quick one. We do need to be moving forward on making decisions in regards to making actual impacts to the community with environmental initiatives. It's just been really difficult over the last few years when at least 2 or 3 years of that was cleaning up the absolute disaster of $17 million wasted on district energy and the failed energy projects of the past administration. So when you have you wanted $17 million wasted? Okay. So when you have those types of failed initiatives, it takes your eyes off the ball of actually going and doing the action items that are required to help with the environment. And so that's important that we fixed this term so that we can actually set a course with our community energy initiative in achieving these goals that's been identified, and actually make them attainable and achievable, and not just pie in the sky fantasy that was never going to be able to be implemented in the city of Guelph. And so it's interesting to say that we have to do stuff, but we have to make sure that we do these initiatives in the right way where we actually have environmental benefits at the end of the day.
Thank you. Question 4 is from OPERG. Premier Ford has undertaken to find billions of dollars in efficiencies in the provincial budget. Cutbacks affecting municipal projects and services are certain to be announced in coming months. What steps will you take to make sure that the people of Guelph have access to affordable public transit, programs to deal effectively with the opioid epidemic, and other programs likely to be affected by these cutbacks? Cam?
Well, we don't know what's coming down from the provincial government, do we, on an hourly basis, basically, and so a lot of the funding, especially for transit, either through the gas tax or through the other funding through the trilateral agreements from the federal and provincial government, it is something to be concerned about because we just don't know what's going to happen, as I said, every hour with the current government. I am disappointed in a lot of the cuts that have taken place already because they are affecting municipalities, including Guelph as well. And so to sustain that, we need to make sure that what we can control from a municipal level, that we maintain that funding, and we have to continue to invest in those things that are important, like transit. In regards to the opioid crisis, I've been very vocal about this already. We need to continue with the supports that we have. And if possible, if some of those funding goes away and we have results of some of the initiatives that have been taking place over the last little while that have been positive results, then we do need to look seriously at trying to fill that gap.
Thank you. Aggie?
I think now more than ever, we're going to need to have a long-term plan over the next 4 years. As a maturing and growing city, we're going to have a number of challenges, and one of those is that we will need to invest more into transit, more into high-speed corridors, into ensuring that people can get to work on time, into reevaluating even the Sunday schedule, as it has been consistently told from those who work in the industrial areas, the night shifts, factory workers, that this doesn't work for them. And that does take money, and that's why we need to start looking at things 4 years in advance and seeing how much we can invest and making those decisions. And I look forward to the service review in that regard as well. In addition, for the opioid crisis, I believe what we need is a mental health strategy. The City of Guelph has a health plan, an emergency response plan, and I think given the nature that we've already seen the Ford government roll back on promises to funding mental health, and being a community that has really wonderful resources, I think bringing everyone together to the table, including emergency services, is going to be an important step in moving forward to analyzing what resources we have, what resources we need, and which ones we can share to come up with a holistic, community-based solution to the opioid crisis.
Thank you.
Mm.
Cam, your response to Aggie?
Well, sure. Just back to transit for a moment. When the previous government, the Liberal government, and the federal government announced just a little while ago before the government change that there would be $106 million coming down for transit, in their infrastructure funding. But the only way to get that $106 million is if the city commits to $37 million over 10 years. And so when that announcement was made, I immediately said, I am committed to making sure that we have that $37 million so we can get the $106 million from the federal and provincial government. Now that funding was secure, which is good. And so we talk about 4 years, but we have to think way past 4 years. We have to think 10, 15 years down the road. And I'm glad that I'm looking forward to the service review as well in regards to transit. But I'm also pointing out that in my own platform, it specifically states that I want to make sure that we're expanding transit to employment areas in the city of Guelph.
Thank you. Aggie, your response to Cam.
In the last year, I think that it's probably been the most difficult time for transit users. I know that I can, on a frequent basis, see that routes are not being met. Bus drivers aren't being able to meet the times. Routes are canceled unexpectedly, and a large part of this has been because of the reliance of overtime. To be spending $120,000 sometimes a month on overtime, to be working drivers to the bone, and to have allowed this to go on for a year, I think is unacceptable. Service review aside, that contract should have been filled, and those 20 positions should have been hired immediately, and this shouldn't have allowed to continue for a year. So, I mean, I would hope that your commitment is as strong as you have said so in your platform, and Cam, you do continue to make good on that promise, but I really feel for the transit workers, and I really feel for how hard this year has been on them. And you were so fast to react to parking, yourself and council, when that happened in the downtown area. And I find it just disappointing that that kind of pressure to act wasn't there for transit in the last year.
I hope another transit question.
The fifth question is from the Guelph District Labour Council. We know that more and more jobs in the private sector are precarious. Too many employees get less than a living wage or too few hours of employment to support themselves and their families. The so-called sharing economy has been criticized because so many of its participants work without either job security or benefits. Will you protect secure, decently paid jobs of public service workers? Or, if you regard it as a priority to find efficiencies in the municipal budget, are there ways you will ensure that privately employed workers performing municipal tasks are decently paid and protected? Aggie, this is your question first.
I'm committed to public services. I actually spent a summer working in the material recycling facility, so that was a good experience. I stand with our city workers in this regard. I would like to see them better supported. Maybe transit will come up again now, but as I've just mentioned, I do have serious concerns about the amount of overtime that has been worked by transit drivers. I have serious concerns around the fact of wages being rolled back at the material recycling facility for some people who have been working there for up to 18 years. I'm worried as well that even though we've promised to be a certified living wage employer, we never committed to that action. And the County of Wellington has currently said that it's actually $16.50 in this area to have a livable wage. So I'd like to see the City of Guelph meet that in terms of being a leader as a municipality to properly paying employees a living wage. And of course, I will continue to support the movement towards 15 and fairness, and stand by and ensure that every city worker receives the benefits that they deserve and the wage that keeps them motivated to keep coming back to work and to keep making the city as great as possible.
Thank you. Cam.
Thank you very much. So I'm committed to continue doing service reviews, and service reviews at the City of Guelph were implemented under my term. And the reason why is because we owe it to the taxpayers and to the citizens, all citizens, to review the services that we are using other people's money to provide, period. That's what we do. And so they need to ask tough questions about, are we providing the right services? Are we providing them in the right way? Is there another way that we could provide them? Is there somebody else that could provide them? Is there a way we can enhance the services? And we've already done 2 of those service reviews already. The first one was our waste department. We found $1 million in efficiencies, and the union president came up to the microphone and said that it was a great process, that it included the union, that the union was able to give some good suggestions on how to make some revenue, which has been implemented at the city of Guelph. And so these types of relationships is about balance and about being respectful across the table. When it comes to the waste facility and the waste workers that did have wages rolled back, that was approved and negotiated with the union. So remember that, everyone, please. In regards to the living wages, the report that came out from staff indicated that it would be about, I'm trying to remember, I think it was about a $5 million increase to the budget to pay for the living wage. So that's well over that's about a 2% tax increase on everyone across the city for that living wage increase at the time that the report came out.
Thank you. Aggie, your response to Cam.
I would like to say that the union president has since changed, and that and I'm happy that $1 million worth of efficiencies was found in the material recycling facility. However, then if that's happened, do we really need to continue the wage cut that was implemented there, especially for workers who have been working there for nearly 2 decades? In terms of, and again, working bus drivers to the bone, and to be focusing on service reviews, I think, is beneficial. But at the same time, why are we taking our firefighters to arbitration when they've asked for a 7% increase and taking them to that negotiating table? Why are we putting so much pressure on our transit drivers? Why are we rolling back wages for our QP members working for the city? I feel that there's this consistency in the last 4 years of within finding these service reviews and within finding these efficiencies, that there has been this sort of reprisal on frontline workers and city staff. And for me, that's a kind of deeply concerning sort of pattern that's come out of your last 4 years.
Cam.
Yeah. So in regards to transit, I'll talk about the drivers for a moment. Council put in the budget the full complement of drivers required for the routes across the city, but there was a shortfall, and there was hirings that were done, but I'm just going to be very, very truthful in this room. Some of them didn't make the cut when it came to the actual training that was required for driving a bus. That's the truth. Some of them didn't make the cut. So we had to go out again and hire more people. And I'm pleased to say that as of just the last month, we now have the full complement to support the routes across the city of Guelph. And so that's an important thing to note. The other thing is that my competitor wants to keep transit completely public, and that's fine, that's her position. But we already privatize 50% of our mobility services in town. So are you indicating to me that you're going to you're going to get rid of that service across the city? That doesn't make any sense. And the fact that you know some inside information from the fire union and you're negotiating with that in the public right now just shows me that you're not experienced at all to take a leadership position as the mayor,
Cam.
because you shouldn't be negotiating with labor in the public realm. That's unacceptable, and that's not what you do.
Cam, that's public information.
Aggie, I'm sorry. The rules of the debate are, it's 1.5 minutes for each of you on each question, 1.5 minutes for response, and that is all. Those are the rules of the debate, and I have to live by those
What if
rules.
it's a legal issue right now?
Then
Yes.
maybe you will raise it in a
Okay.
subsequent, related to a subsequent question. But it's also, remember, these are questions posed by the audience groups. It's very, very important that their questions be brought to bear and that we use the time accordingly. So question 6 is from Fair Vote Guelph. Guelph uses a first-past-the-post system to elect councillors within their ward and to elect the mayor citywide. The result is that councillors in a fiercely contested election may attain office with only a fraction of voter support, and the mayor too can be elected with just 40% of voter support. Is this, in your view, the best possible system? Do you advocate putting a different system in place? If so, what? Cam, this is your question first.
Sure. I am actually open to looking at different ways, and I've said that already publicly, especially in the last, I think it was about 2 years ago, this issue came to council around ranked balloting is really the one that has been talked quite a bit about across the city, across the province, sorry. At that time, a lot of municipalities said, you know what, we kind of got to see how this will play out now that that's an option that we can look at how we vote people in. Now, to the credit to the City of London, they actually said that they were going to give the ranked balloting a try. So City of London is actually doing that this time. And then the commitment from myself and from council back to staff was that, you know, let's see how London fares with this new way of ranked balloting, and then we can see in the following years in the next term whether or not we want to stick with the process we have right now or not. Further to that, though, is questions around whether or not we even have to elect 12, whether it should be a different composition, less amount of councillors, different type of ward boundaries, and all of that will also be discussed in the following term, whether or not we hire a consultant that would be willing to look at all those issues to help council. So it's not just in the voting, but it's also in who we vote for, how many, and the boundaries and whatnot as we grow as a city. Those questions need to be considered.
Thank you. Aggie?
I think it's time that we move and begin to have a discussion about possibly moving to a full-time council. I think that this would be a great benefit to the city. Redrawing ward line boundaries is important as well. I think that most of the Ward 6 councillors probably feel for this as well, that it's a massive, it almost feels like half of the city. So going and doing a review of that would be beneficial. In addition, there's a lot of benefits to moving to a full-time council in the sense that it opens up the opportunity for more, for different people to run. It's hard to have a part-time position for some folks to take a pay cut, or for single parents to decide to run to only be making $30,000 a year because they can't give up their other full-time job to make ends meet. So I think the opportunity of moving towards a full-time council would open up the opportunity for individuals to not make a decision of, hey, I can't put my name forward to run because I don't know how I'm going to make ends meet on the wage that is there. So I think there's definitely a great conversation to be made for that.
Thank you. Cam, would you like to respond?
No, I answered the question. It's okay.
Okay. Aggie, would you like to say something further on this question?
It just has to be on this question. I'll pass then.
So that ends the first part of the debate on the set questions. Now we move to the second part of the debate, which is questions from the floor. And there have been a number of questions that have come from the floor. But I do want to remind you that this is an event put on by volunteers. At some point in the next little while, volunteers will go around to pass the hat to collect a donation, if you can afford to give one, to pay the costs of this event. So I did want to just give you that heads up. Now, I think I will continue with the order of questioning. The last question Cam was the first to answer first, so this time I'll move to Aggie first. So these questions are from the floor, so there's no particular group associated with them. What is your position regarding the protection of groundwater, specifically the Clare Maltby moraine, and secondly, banning plastic water bottles in our municipality?
I support the motion to completely remove plastic water bottles from City Hall, from any sort of city-operated business, of course. I think that these are the steps that we can take to move forward in a positive direction in this way. I think the implementation of more water fountains in and around public parks has been a great initiative, and I'd like to see that continue around sports fields and other areas as well to encourage users to use renewable or reusable water bottles. And in terms of the Clare Maltby area, protecting our moraine is a key issue of mine, and I featured it quite prominently in my platform for this reason. The moraine itself is full of these rolling hills, and they actually act as the point of recharge for the aquifer. And I think it's important when we think about this kind of sustainable development and building sustainably developed communities, we really need to think about the natural landscape itself and how those areas of the moraine act as recharge zones when we begin to plan for that. So I would like to see a clear consciousness in doing this forward, because if we do it wrong, that's not good. I think that we don't have a pipeline acting as a straw to take water from somewhere else. And as I think that came up in the last provincial election, this would be a multi-billion-dollar project.
Thank you. Cam?
Sure. So I was the first one to come out to actually say that I think we should be looking at removing single-use plastics at city facilities across our city. So I'm taking a leadership position on that already. When it comes to the Clare Maltby and protecting the water, I think people need to hear this from me. I get it. Like, I really do. That is an important part in our city. And we need to be very, very careful as the development that happens there. I think what's missing, though, is this narrative that's out there that either our staff at the City of Guelph or the professional consultants or even myself and councillors, they dismiss it for some reason, and that's not accurate. We take it very, very seriously, and there's a lot of scientific reports, water monitoring that's happening there. In fact, right now, actually at City Hall, is the characterization report that just is available now publicly. And we've also engaged more. That was a motion by council to make sure that we had more public engagement. We've done that. We've actually, through council resolution, we've also added people from the Rolling Hills subdivision and the Protect Our Moraine group to be part of the actual group moving forward on Clare Maltby. So they're a part of all of these reports that are coming forward, and that we can be engaging with them. So, no mayor wants to be accused of not protecting our water, and it certainly will not be me.
Thank you. Aggie, a response to Cam?
Well, I do have one response, because I think it's really important, again, when I was talking about how wonderful we are as a community and how we have these great community stakeholders and groups. I don't think that without the work of Shane Douglas Ward and Plastic Free Guelph, plastic bags and plastic bottles would have been such a hotly contended issue just a few months from this election. So I would really like to thank Plastic Free Guelph on taking that initiative, and of course the support they've had from Wellington Water Watchers, and inspiring us to move forward in this direction.
Cam?
No, that's okay.
Okay. On to the next question. This question is about governance. And I'm reading from the question. My question, the audience, is about municipal governance. Mayor Guthrie has been actively campaigning with select councillors. He says this is because he was unable to implement his agenda over the past council term to both candidates. What do you think the role and responsibility of the mayor is to be, particularly in the context of a democratically elected council representing different views and constituencies? So
So-
this one,
Can-
the first one to answer is Cam.
Sure, can I just get clarity? The
yes.
question is about
The
the
question
role
is
of
about-
mayor, but it's also about as a candidate. So
I
I'm just,
think what it is the role to both candidates. What do you think the role and responsibilities of the mayor are, to be particularly in the context of democratically elected council representing different views and constituencies? So what's the role of the mayor, and what's the role of the mayor, my interpretation is, in relationship to different constituencies that are represented by councillors?
well, the role of the mayor, once the election is done, is to work with the team that's elected across the city of Guelph and to work on the issues that come forward. It's to try to work on collaboration, on compromise, and that has been something that I have absolutely done over this past term. When new information has come forward to me, and I've seen it in other councillors too, and I'm sure we'll see it in some of the candidates that will get elected in October 22nd. There will have to be some compromise and working together for the best of Guelph. It is a Guelph first. Once you're elected, it's Guelph first, and you need to make sure that you're fully informed on every issue. And from a governance perspective, you have to work not only collaboratively around the table, but you have to make sure that you're working well outside of the council chambers as well. And some of that's been missing on this term. I have no problem saying that out loud. But hopefully, after the election, we will have 13 like-minded people putting Guelph first and making sure that we get the work done that the citizens want us to.
Thank you. Aggie?
I believe consolidating power prior to a municipal election is not a way to open yourself up for collaboration or to listen. I think it's trying to turn one vote into 6 or 7, and I don't think that it's fair to the citizens of Guelph. We have 35 candidates running in all of the wards, and we don't know who the city of Guelph and the voting population is going to choose. And I don't think it's a good idea to be presumptive on this. In the case in which the chosen councillors that the mayor has been campaigning with don't get elected, what happens to the feelings of those who he didn't campaign with? And in terms of feelings, I mean, hostility, negativity, or that kind of wanting to come and collaborate. I believe it's starting off the council term after October 22nd or into the next year on a very bad foot. And I just feel that it's not the best step forward, and it's beginning to introduce kind of sort of a party mentality into the horseshoe and into municipal politics. And I'm not quite sure if Toronto's not doing it, then are we really ready for this? And that's something you as the voter population is going to have to address at the ballot box.
Thank you. Cam?
So the question has completely veered off to talking about candidates and walking door to door with candidates, and that's fine. So I'll address that. So the reason why that has happened is because there were candidates in the last term, and there are candidates this term that are misrepresenting themselves at the doors, telling people that they're in agreement with the stronger and safer platform that I've put together for the community. And yet, on October the 23rd, when they're elected and the lights are on with the camera, they're going to completely switch things around. So they're using me as an association to try to get votes at the door. So I have been transparent, and I have been transparent to make sure that people are actually aware of those that are supportive of some of the common themes that I have in my platform. I'm not expecting everyone in this city to have to vote for them. I'm also not expecting all of those candidates will have to be in lockstep with me on any issue. That's absolutely true. But there are common issues, and it's that the candidates have expressed interest in, and I think it's important for a transparency point of view for the city of Guelph to see exactly what those candidates are, and they're not misrepresenting themselves at the doors to potential voters.
Thank you. Aggie, response?
I go to the doors on my own and I do my own communication, and I tell people, you know, what I want to deliver them, and they respond with what they've heard, and we have a conversation about it. If I find out that I've been misrepresented or called something terrible at the door, I simply just tell them that's not the truth. And so does my team, and so do those who are volunteering for me and knocking on my doors. I'm running my own campaign. I'm representing my own values, because I don't know who's going to get elected and who's going to sit around the horseshoe with me if that ends up working out on October 22nd. And I know that the first thing I'm going to have to do is come in with wide open ears to listen and collaborate. And I just feel that these actions are 2 steps ahead, and they're the ones that aren't going to foster that kind of open, collaborative, listening, relationship building that we deserve moving into the next 4 years. So that's, I know that I show up at events and other candidates are there, but in this municipal election, it has just been me and my team. And yes, I have like-minded values, and I certainly have relationships with some councillors already around the horseshoe. But during this time, we have decided to keep separate and to focus on our own campaigns, because as I've said before, I do not know who's going to get elected on October 22nd.
Thank you. The next question is on crime. Do you believe that we need to increase funding to the police services? If so, why? How will the funds make the city more secure? If not, why not? And this question goes first to Aggie.
I believe we need to address staffing concerns for the police. This has been something that's been ongoing for 4 years. If you look at the 2017 annual report, you can see over the last 4 years, overtime has been increasing. So it's important to ensure, and even when you look at the number of police officers per capita, that has significantly decreased in the last number of years. And this is something that is important to address. First and foremost, a tired policing staff, one that is not able to engage with the community as much as they want, is not beneficial for us. It's not beneficial for a service that I'm rather proud to say is quite progressive in thinking about drug-related strategies, the opioid crisis. We're fortunate to have a chief of police who has recognized that police services have a role to play in ongoing addressing drug-related criminal activity. But at the same time, what I'm not entirely comfortable with is when we talk about surpluses and when we talk about drug prevention. I'm sure, yes, the police do have a role to play. We have so many other social services. And I think if we begin to silo these types of really complex public health crises and start to move them into the direction of the police, we're really starting to stretch that role. And the more we stretch that role, I mean, we can fix the staffing concerns as much as we want, but the more responsibility we put on our police officers in terms of mental health, I think the harder their job will be.
Thank you. Cam.
Thank you. So my platform clearly outlines up to $750,000 right away to try to help with the crime, the theft, drugs, and the issues that are behind the drug use in our city. I talk about having to make sure that we get more frontline officers immediately, and that does need to happen. I sit on the police board, and so I'm telling you that that does need to happen. The second thing is that I mentioned in my platform is technology. So if we consider red light cameras in school zones, for instance, that can help with safety for our kids, but can also alleviate some of the officers to have to be there. Instead, they can be elsewhere and proactively engaging with the community and keeping our community safe. I also talk about prevention programs, and that money would go towards prevention programs within the police force or outside of it. But one of the best programs that's happened at the city of Guelph through the police is what's called Impact, and it's actually having mental health workers embedded with our police force. And yeah, you should clap for that one. And so what's happened is that the stats on the reduced calls of our policing going out has drastically reduced, which wages, meaning that our police can start to focus on the things they should be. But programs like that, because of the crisis that we're in right now in our city, need to be considered to be expanded. And so some of the money, I believe, needs to go there as well. So it's options of officers, it's technology, it's prevention, but the bottom line is we must invest in this now, because later on we're going to wish that we hadn't if we don't do it right away.
Thank you. Aggie, a response?
I'm not against that, and I'm not against investing in an emergency service, especially one that is going to face many more challenges as the city continues to mature and grow in the rapid way that it is doing so. Impact is also a provincially mandated program, and we've had a number of provincial pilot projects that have been great, including in EMS as well. My concern is we don't get to tell the police what they do with their budget once they get that money. And again, when we're relying on them as a resource to solve and to come up with an entire drug prevention strategy, to deal with enforcement, to deal with the fallout of mental health, to be the front line on addictions and addiction services, I just feel that no matter how much we staff police in that direction, we're still going to consistently see more stress leave, and we're still going to see too much pressure on a role that is become very muddied as we move forward. And I think that to be helpful is address the staffing concerns, ensure that there is money, because I do think red light cameras are a great idea as well. But wherever that surplus is in those areas, such as public health crises and addictions, we don't silo and funnel that money and rely on police to be the solution to such a complex problem.
Thank you. Cam, your response?
Well, I'll just add to that, not so much as a response, but one of the programs that's just come about, and it's a number of stakeholders that are actually providing the funding for this, is we have basically like a social worker that's a relationship builder, if I could call her that is walking around the downtown and is meeting people in need and is working with them and creating relationships, building trust to try to move them away from the substance abuse and substance addictions that they have and into a better life for themselves. But that funding is only available for a little while. And so some of the funding that I'm talking about here, when I say up to the $750,000, some of this individual that I just described to you, that's the type of funding that we have to have from a prevention as well, and making sure that's because the results of that over the last few months have been excellent for the downtown community and for the people that are in need. And I don't want to see that kind of funding run out. So it's not just about policing, it's not just about technology, it's also prevention methods, and that's just another example I wanted to give the community to know that that's actually happening right now in our downtown, and we need to continue those types of services too.
I'm going to switch the order here. We've got a question on cannabis. With recreational cannabis being legalized throughout Canada on October 17th, 2018, how will you commit to provide police services with the tools they need? To some extent, I wonder if this is repetitive. That they need to ensure a smooth as possible transition towards legalized cannabis in our community. Will you support a storefront store in Guelph in 2019? That is Cam's question first.
Okay.
Yes, I apologize.
October 17th, the day before my birthday. What a birthday present. All right. So so what's happening with that is we actually had the Ministry of Finance and that team come into City Hall just a few weeks ago, and I had a meeting with them in regards to this issue. So municipalities are actually scrambling right now because the previous government said we're going to do it through distribution through this method, and then now the PC government saying, nope, we're going to do it through this method. And so there are a lot of questions that municipalities are asking, including, of course, Guelph, such as zoning or buffer zones around daycares and schools and churches, where they can be located or not located. market. And so there's a huge amount of engagement that needs to be done with stakeholders across the city of Guelph, a huge amount, including with the school board. And so my answer to this question at this time is that the best thing for us to do and to follow our engagement processes properly is to opt out at this point, and then by early, maybe in the spring next year, after we do a community engagement process, only then should we look at allowing an opt-in to the retail sales within the community. If we don't do the engagement process, it will probably backfire on us, and it doesn't follow best practices either. So let's opt out for a moment. Let's do an engagement process, and then we can look to opt in maybe in the spring next year.
Thank you. Aggie.
I was under the impression the Ford government was only going to allow one opt-in. I'm willing to look into my research to see this. However, I think it is important. I'm going to say why I think it's very important to opt in. Opting in doesn't mean there won't be a year-long process of community engagement to figure out how this model will look, who will be responsible for enforcement, how we will ensure that the product is being sold nowhere near in those buffer zones, of which Cam mentioned. We were supposed to be one of the first brick and mortar stores for the CBO. So I would say that illustrates that there is a demand in the community for it. I think I think if we engage in the process, and because it will be at minimum a year long before we even begin to see a storefront popping up, is that it is important to recognize that if somebody wants something, they will access it in any way that they see fit. So if we can provide a legal supply and not tell people, you can only rely on online sales, which doesn't work for a lot of folks, we're not going to break those relationships between the black market and those who choose to smoke pot. And I think we need to get ahead of this curve. And I think if we think long-term on this, this will have a positive influence and implications for enforcement and to actually being able to take a tackle on that black market.
Thank you. Cam. Cam, would you like to respond?
Well, I'll just talk a bit more about it since I know a little bit more about it, just for the community to know what's going on. So edibles is a big situation that everyone's talking about too. So edibles will not be coming into play until about a year after. And one of the mandates that the government is looking at is making sure that they're not attractive, so they can't make edibles like gummy bears or things like that would be attractive to young people. And so that will be coming in about a year. And so we have, the reason why I bring it up is just to let everyone know this is going to not be just an issue that can be kind of solved in a year. It's going to be a few years as not only cannabis rolls out on October 17th, not only do we do the engagement, not only do we find out whether or not we're going to do retail stores, but then even a year after that, there's going to be more and more coming. So the community just needs to kind of get ready for these types of conversation, and I'm looking forward to having it with everyone.
Thank you. Aggie, response?
I just want to reinforce that messaging. People are still going to buy. People are still going to smoke as of October 17th. And if we don't give viable options for people to be able to buy what they want, they will look to other sources and continue to use them. And I don't want to see them continuing to make money off of something that, has been in the process of being legalized for so long. And nor should there be a stigma attached to choosing to smoke cannabis.
Thank you. Next question is on parkland. As Guelph's population grows, how important is it for you to prioritize adding parkland to our city? What will you do as mayor to ensure the city meets the resident parkland ratios as required by the city's operational plan? Will you take measures to ensure developers contribute what the city is entitled to under provincial legislation? And what steps will you take to identify and secure parkland as the population grows and available land dwindles? The first on this is Aggie.
So the parkland dedication bylaw is older than me, so I'm glad that it is up for review right now. I know this is a hotly contested issue that has been in and out of council through delegations, as well as through the paper and through a lot of opinion pieces being written in on this. I also have a concern. Right now, actually, I would ask that maybe the city of Guelph should focus on clarifying the numbers and to get the information out there and to be clear. I think that this is something that really matters, because if we are actually under-servicing with parkland, if we are currently saying that natural heritage sites or sites that could be developed as parkland but most likely won't be for a number of reasons are being counted as this space, then there is a discretion. And I think the biggest problem with this issue is there's so many discretions from how much developers have to pay and how much we should be entitled to by new standards, how much their actual hectares are per person, and the fact that we are developing so aggressively and consistently add extra floors or add extra units or structures to areas of new development, and that people feel that, you know what, we're not accounting for parkland properly because we're using a bylaw that's now 30 years old, 29, 30 years old.
Thank you. Cam?
So, thank you. The bylaw is from 1989, I believe, and so it is good that this term of council has started that review process to update it. No one argues that a 1989 bylaw needs to be updated. This one here is coming to council. I believe it's January. It's coming to council for the final recommendation from staff and to be voted on. And I'm looking forward to it. It is going to be very updated. It's not just because of what's happened since 1989. There's a lot of communities around the area that have even updated them in the last few years. So City of Guelph does have a lot of catching up to do with that. But yeah, definitely when that bylaw is updated, we're going to have to adhere to it. We're going to have to make sure that we mandate that developers are adhering to that bylaw, and that we're collecting either money or we're getting the right amount of ratio of parkland as developments continue. The reason why there's some discrepancies that my competitors just brought up in confusion there with what the city is saying is the city's not saying the wrong thing. What's happened is that open space and parks were separated in 2009, I think, and once in 2012 to be defined differently. And so the different ratios and the different amounts that are required under our official plan were clearly defined and separated. And that's why there's different targets now.
Aggie, your response.
I think I'm just curious about the mayor's statement of how it's going to be very updated, and would prefer to ask that as a question to him for clarification.
Well,
if that's allowed.
Yeah, that's fine. If that's your response, that's fine.
Yes.
And then
Am I
Cam
allowed to
gets the
respond?
final word. Yes, absolutely, because you're the final on this question.
Oh, okay.
So it's back to you.
Well, because it's from 1989. That's why it really needs to be updated. And so it's going to probably...
But in what way was my question?
Sorry?
In what way? My question was in what way? Like, how is it going to be that it's going to be very updated? Like, what are the measures that you will be taking forward to really uphaul this bylaw?
I was about to answer that. Sorry. So the draft has not come out publicly yet. I have not seen it, but it is going to probably I would imagine will up the rates that developers will have to pay, and include different percentages that are going to be required across the city to make sure that we maintain the targets.
Thank you. Now we on to I believe, the final question for the evening, and this is about library services. And this one, the first is to Cam. There is now a motion on record that a new main library of a specified minimum size will be built as part of the Baker Street redevelopment. When will funding be attached to this project, and what will be the source of the funding?
So I believe it's around 80,000 square feet, if I'm correct around that. That's what was determined through the needs assessment study that was done through the library board, and then that library board study flowed up to council. And so that was it was close. It was almost unanimous. I think just one councillor voted against it. But that was a lot of work to get council to get on board with that. I was very proud of being able to collaborate with everyone to help them understand why it was a really needed asset for our downtown, especially on Baker Street, because it will really activate Baker Street. It will provide not only the library services, but other commercial opportunities, maybe institutional and some residential there as well. Sorry, what was the other half of that question quickly?
It was, what will be the source of the funding?
Oh, the source of the funding. So I believe it's in around 2024, 2025, I think at the latest, is in the capital forecast as to when that would happen, because there's a lot of work that has to be done on Baker Street to get it ready before shovels in the ground could happen anyways. And source of the funding, it could be going to debenture, but I'm hoping that the private sector, wink wink to all of the wonderful private sector businesses in this town, that you will maybe step up and sponsor the library. And also I'm hoping that we can get some from other levels of government. I've already been in negotiations, and not negotiations, but in conversations with upper levels of government and trying to fund the new library as well.
Thank you. Aggie.
I mean, I delegated on behalf of the Friends of the Public Library when this was coming to council. I know that nothing will be finalized until this project passes through the next budget, and I want to be clear that I very much so do support having and seeing this project be followed through. I think I've said it on a number of times. When I go to the library, I can't find a parking space if I drive on a rainy day, because it's such an important tool and necessity. I think it's important here to also, when we talk about the minimum size of the library, and I understand that that was a hotly contested issue among neighbors, but to remember that libraries serve much larger roles in the community than just being a place to take out books. They serve as centers of education, they serve for programming, they help new immigrants, they are also wonderful areas to do things like keep cultural memory alive. So I think having the space to have an auditorium, having the space to have rooms for programming are all going to be so important, and I do look forward to collaborating in a way to see this project happen as soon as possible, and to, of course, reach out to those who want to see that as a part of our community and to find that funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Cam. Cam.
Oh, sorry.
Anything further? That's okay.
No, I think, it is talked about for, so I'll take a little bit of time. It was talked about for so long. I'm really proud of what we've done over the last 4 years. I really am. We were able to move that forward and work collaboratively with the library board. It was really great relationship. It was an exciting moment for our city to have that vote take place and to see what's going to happen. And now we've already picked, the city's already picked through an RFP a developer, a kind of a general contractor for the area for Baker Street. And so I'm just really, really excited for it, because that part of our downtown needs a lot of activation. The upper Wyndham, and so I can, it's nice to kind of close your eyes and to think, down the road what that area of our downtown is going to be like. It's going to be vibrant, and there's going to be lots of culture and green space in the area and people living there, and it's going to be a really exciting time in our city, and I hope I get to cut the ribbon.
Aggie. Aggie.
Just a final comment. I'm glad you changed your mind. So thank you.
You're welcome. Me too. Because it's the right thing for Guelph. Guelph first.
So, we've now reached the end of part 2 of the debate, and the last portion of the evening is to allow each of the candidates 3 minutes for their closing remarks to finish up this evening. Now, if I am going by the rotation I've been doing, then in fact Aggie would be the first to go and Cam would be second.
I recognize that I'm a different type of candidate. And I recognize that over the last 2 weeks or so, what I've been hit with the most is the question of experience. And I think that this is an appropriate time to discuss that. I think what is challenging for my generation in particular, and why I think we've seen a rise over the last few months across the Western world of 25 to 35-year-olds standing up, or millennials as they're known, is because we feel we're not being properly represented. When I was young and growing up, I was told that if I got an education, I'd be able to walk out of there, get a job, get a mortgage almost immediately. And I think what I quickly found, and a number of those in my generation found as well, that those things just didn't add up. So throughout my last 10 years, I have worked in the independent film industry on a variety of projects. And in between those times, I've also found myself working in a lot of precarious work as well, to try and move myself forward, all in the meantime trying to balance getting 2 degrees through university. There is, for me, and I think a number of folks in my generation, no linear path, because the way in which the economy worked out and the way in which the cookie crumbled didn't allow for us to move in that direction, or didn't allow all of us to move in that direction. So we've kind of had to, as I like to say, fandangled our way through it. I think what this experience has taught me, from working as a farmhand to sorting garbage to soldering solar panels, in between trying to be an assistant director and pursuing my dreams in the independent film industry, that my passion wasn't being met, and I just had so much more fire to offer. And that was my motivation for running for office, because I do think that this generation's voice matters. My voice matters, and I feel that we do deserve a seat at the table, because we offer an incredible perspective on what is happening to us now, and also an relentless, unrelenting hope, I think, to make it better. So thank you.
Thank you, Aggie. Cam.
Thank you very much. In 2014, I became the mayor with a clear mandate to clean up the financial mismanagement and waste of City Hall. And I ushered in a new open for business attitude. And it's been my honor and pleasure to serve the city for the last 4 years. And I'm proud to report, as was already mentioned in some of the answers, that there's been millions saved and millions avoided in future cost avoidance. And there's also been millions invested in local businesses and jobs in our community. I really want to take a moment to thank everyone in this room for your contributions, your passion, and your commitment to working with the city for making it the best possible place. Whether the issue is water protection, green spaces, poverty, addictions, or affordable housing, the dialogue that we have underway before and tonight and after is good opportunities to find solutions. Guelph is on the right track, but I know that there's still work to be done. And every day I speak to residents concerned about crimes like bike thefts and car break-ins and downtown safety and decent acts in our parks. And these concerns are very real, and I take them very seriously, and I don't take them lightly at all. A stronger and safer community requires the whole community, and we must work with community groups, just like the ones in the room and other levels of government, to invest in programs to address mental illness and addiction problems. We must look out for our neighbors and invest in our police service to provide a stronger frontline presence, as already been discussed. Over the past 4 years, I have focused on ensuring that municipal tax dollars are spent on municipal issues. We have invested in local infrastructure, like roads and sidewalks in every corner of our city. We also initiated service reviews to ensure programs are being delivered in the most efficient and effective way possible. The service review program has already uncovered more than $1 million in efficiencies. This is money we can reinvest back into our community, into programs and services to make the lives of everyone here better. This election, I have 6 pillars for the stronger, safer community: neighborhood public safety and crime prevention, investing in local infrastructure and community assets, promoting affordable communities, continuing the service reviews, and delivering continued leadership. These issues may not be glamorous, but they are important. Over the past 8 years, I've spoken with thousands of residents and business owners and community builders. Everyone agrees that Guelph is a wonderful place to build a life and be a part of a community, but we must work together to make it stronger and safer. As always, I encourage everyone to continue the discussion with me by phone, by email, social media. I strongly believe in being accessible to you, the citizens of our great city, because I am the mayor for all.
Thank you, Cam. And with that, I'll say thanks to both candidates. I will also thank you for inviting me to moderate this debate. And now I'll turn it over to our host to end the evening. Thank you.
Before I bring tonight to a close, I just want to share one announcement. That's at the Upper Grand Public School Board. There will be a Guelph all candidates, that's wards 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and Pushlinch tomorrow, that's Thursday, at College Heights Secondary School from 7 to 9 p.m. I would also like to start my closing just by asking you to join me in thanking Dr. Charlotte Yates, who did, I think, a great job tonight. And not just to both Aggie and Cam here on the stage, but to the many ward candidates, and I see a few trustees here in the room. Thank you. I think we live in a wonderful city, and I think we should not discount whether you're going to vote for Cam or for Aggie or for no one in this election, that the willingness to serve means a lot, and it makes a lot of what makes the city great. So thank you to everyone standing. And as we close, thank you again to all the candidates, to you, the audience, for your respectful, enthusiastic participation in an important part of our city's democracy, and the volunteers who again made this evening happen. I think we had a lively and informative evening, and we hope that you feel better able to make an informed decision when you go to the polls. And I leave you with this final note. Advanced polls open on October 12th to 14th, and Election Day is October 22nd. I hope you make the time to go out and vote. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.